Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to your Thursday edition of the Post Up with David Grubb right here on Boot Crew Media. I, of course, am David Grubb. Thank you for joining me. A lot to talk about on this Thursday afternoon as the offseason continues full steam ahead. I want to start today's show as we get into these topics, and I just want to give credit to where it's due. Schmidt Dua with In the Know gave a lot of the reporting that's going to happen in this first segment, so I just want to give him his credit for doing the legwork. He was in New York for the draft and reported a lot on what happened there and the perception of this franchise around the league. So let's get into that. It was not obviously a normal draft night for the Pelicans when it occurred. The Pelicans took a lot of risks and they were aggressive, and those things have been lauded by Pelicans fans. They have been derided by the national media. And so there's a lot of competing opinions about what the Pelicans did, what it means for their future, and what it means for their present as well, because there is an urgency that comes with the decisions that they made. But there's also a lot of scrutiny. So the Pelicans did make arguably the biggest move of the draft in trading their unprotected 2026 first-round pick, and in order to get Derek Queen in the 13 spot. They already had the number 7 spot from the lottery, and everyone knows they traded up to get 13 from 23 along with that pick next season. So they took players who are immensely talented, guys with high upside, not the picks that were slotted to them most commonly at either of those spots, but they took the guys that they wanted. During the draft cycle, it was clear in a lot of circles that Joe Dumars and Troy Weaver had honed in on Derek Queen for certain. I think obviously in the top 7, you have to just take things as they fall, and you get to the best player available at 7, the player that you like the most. And clearly for them, that was Jeremiah Fears, though you had some other players who I think could have been solutions, like a Common Malawach, to play your center position, but it's neither here nor there. It doesn't matter at this point. These are the players they picked. Neither one of those players is bad players, but again, that's not where the scrutiny lies. So the question becomes, what did these moves ultimately say about the direction of the franchise and what it means for their commitments now, what it means to their commitment to this team in the future, and how big of a gamble is this really? So here's the thing that Schmidt was posing and pointing out, that the reaction from other management teams from around the league, whether it be agents, whether it be front office people, whether it be those kinds of the folks who make the moves in this league, execs widely panned what the Pelicans did. And one of the things that was mentioned in the article was that the Pelicans, when they offered this unprotected pick to Atlanta had to make sure that they were hearing what they were hearing, that they didn't expect the Pelicans to offer them an unprotected pick for Derek Queen. They didn't think that was going to happen. Not Derek Queen, but the 13th pick. That is a problem in the process. If don't give concessions that the other team doesn't need, right? If the Hawks would have done the deal, let's say, with the protections, I think there'd be a lot less hand-wringing over the deal. If you had gotten a top 5 protected or top 4 protected, whatever, there'd be a lot less hand-wringing over this deal. But the process, and that has been the biggest criticism, I think. The players are kind of exempt from the criticism in that regard today for what they can bring on the court, what their talents are. They're not part of the critique. The critique is reserved for Joe Dumars and Troy Weaver. And the concern that around the league is that, next year's draft is supposed to be better than this year's draft. So you shouldn't be punting on a chance in next year's draft, especially when you have the uncertainty that the Pelicans have. And what is that uncertainty? And we'll get into that. We'll get into how these things look from the Pelicans' perspective and how they look overall. But does this front office have the respect of the rest of the NBA? And that is a big question. The only way now, because we have to remember, Joe Dumars, the end of his tenure in Detroit, was widely just viewed as a disappointment, obviously. Troy Weaver's tenure as general manager in Detroit, also viewed as a failure. You put those two together with their recent track records as far as being the person making the final decision, not contributing to the final decision, not assessing certain things, but being the person in charge where the buck stops. There's been a lot of, let's say, difficulty over the last 10 to 15 years of those two resumes combined. So if Troy Weaver and Joe Dumars are going to be this way, if they're going to be as aggressive as they've been, and again, I think there are a lot of fans who welcome this approach. If they are going to be this aggressive, they have to get results. It is way too early, obviously, before a game has been played, to judge the final outcome. And I said this right after Derek Queen was drafted, that it's not fair to judge this season for Derek Queen individually and assess his value for the next however many years he's with the Pelicans. The pressure is on Derek Queen to live up to this. He said as much in his introductory press conference that he wanted to make Joe Dumars look good in making this decision and betting on him. I wouldn't put that pressure on myself. Just go out there and play basketball. You don't know how the season's going to go. You got to adjust to the NBA, and rookies in this league typically do not make major impact in year one unless they are phenomenally talented and put in the right position. We'll talk about that as well. But let's look at why the Pelicans did this again. So you have Zion Williamson returning. You are betting on him. Clearly, the Pelicans have put their faith in Zion that he's going to be able to play 60 plus games. Okay. If Zion is your franchise player and you don't want to play the long game, and in this league now, the windows are a lot tighter. I think 3 years is the max that you can project your team in this NBA. Probably closer to 2 years, really. You have to make big changes financially and roster-wise, really every 2 years now. The Pelicans are trying to build a young core around Zion, but the overwhelming part of this roster now is very young. This is a roster 26 and under for the most part. With Fears, I get it. The Pelicans have struggled to find a lead guard. He gives them speed. He gives them scoring ability. He gives them potential. Queen, post presence, high IQ, the ability to, because again, the pathway to him for him to the court is way shorter than it is for Jeremiah Fears. Derek Queen could be getting significant minutes from game one. I think the process will be a lot longer for Jeremiah Fears. Again, point guard being the most difficult position to transfer from the college ranks to the NBA. And then we're also talking about one of the youngest players in this draft assuming that role. You know, he should be just getting out of prom now and getting ready for his first collegiate season, based on his age and what he did. He, remember, classified up. But when you talk to people about the potential of either one of these players, they all rave about both of them having high potential. But here's the cost. So if you lose that 2026 pick, if this team underperforms, and I said in my last show that I think that their win total is somewhere between 35 and 42. Remember, this is a 21-win team. And you can say, well, it had all these health problems, but it was also a weirdly constructed 21-win team. It's still a weirdly constructed team. It's more talented now. It is better offensively, but it's still a weirdly constructed team. You are committing to two rookies to have significant roles, and I don't know if that's possible while you're still trying to make a playoff run. You know, you're asking a lot for either one of them to be significant contributors in year one on a playoff team. You're putting a lot of pressure on the medical staff to make sure that the perception, because, you know, you look at these injuries and the medical staff is not the reason that Herb Jones, damaged his shoulder. They're not the reason that Trey Murphy got the injury that he got. They're not the reason that DeJounte Murray tore his Achilles. They are not those reasons. That's not on the medical staff. But the perception is that the medical staff is a problem. So you put a lot of pressure on them because they've got to keep these players on the court this season. You put a lot of pressure on Zion Williamson, too, who deserves the pressure. But there's a lot of pressure on Zion, who has been inconsistent at best. If we wanted to be polite, we would say inconsistent in his appearances with the Pelicans. One appearance over 60 games in his entire career. And now you're asking Zion to hold this weird amalgamation together. This move for better or for worse, will define Joe Dumars and Troy Weaver's legacy in New Orleans, much the way the Anthony Davis trade ultimately defined David Griffin's tenure. For Griffin, it ended up being a loss. We have a lot of time to find out if the same is true for Fears and Queen. A lot of time. That will not be decided in year one. It won't be decided in year two. It won't even be decided in year three. You could say they're behind in one of those based on what the outcomes could be. You could say it's not where you want it to be, but we can't decide that quickly. But, there's still pressure on those players. If it works, Joe Dumars and Troy Weaver are ahead of the game. They will be lauded as kings, as the people who brought back New Orleans basketball to where fans really want it to be. If it fails, though, and this is just to make sure that everyone is aware of the possibilities and the consequences of these actions. It is not to say that they were the wrong decisions, but you have to be aware of what is possible on the other side of these things, because if it does come to pass, then you can't be surprised to say no one told you that this could be the outcome. So you don't want to have years of regret over this the way that you kind of do over now when you look at the Anthony Davis trade to say, what did the Pelicans really get out of it? A couple of playoff berths with no playoff wins. All the players from that trade who came in are gone. None of them lived up to their potential in New Orleans. So ultimately that trade is viewed as a failure for the New Orleans Pelicans. So for fans, there are things that they're going to be looking for. And I think these are the things y'all are going to be watching out for early on. What are the minutes that Fears and Queen get early on? How committed is Willie Green to playing these two? How do they fit along with Zion Williamson? That's going to be important as well. They will have opportunities to play on the court with Zion. How do they fit with him? Do they build chemistry as a duo? Because ultimately they could be the pillars of this franchise going forward if Zion Williamson proves to be unworthy of that crown. These two could be the pillars. So how quickly do they build their personal chemistry? Whether it's running the pick and roll, whether it's looking for each other offensively, just finding Queen on the block and Fears getting him kicking back out, Fears playing off of him. How quickly does that happen? How quickly does Fears adjust to the NBA game, the physicality, the speed of it? That's always the first thing players talk about is the game, no matter what level, it's moving faster because everyone is better. The decision-making has to be faster. The reactions have to be quicker. Are those players getting the requisite opportunity? They will fail early on. That's just the nature of the beast. Guys are going to fail, but are they getting opportunities and are they being put in position to succeed? Watch the organization, as always. If you see them down the road start talking about, hey, we didn't really have this expectation this year. We didn't think about this. We're not worried about that. If they're focused on having that conversation, I'm not going to be happy. If you are confident in the process you're doing, then you stick to that. You stick to that. But you have to have a consistent plan. So if they know what they're doing, if they, in their minds, if they understand exactly what they have and they've got their plan in place for these young men, fine. But if you start walking it back on this decision early on and showing that you might not be as confident in it as you will be, there will be sharks in the water. I think overall what they've set the tone for is this season is they're all in on these moves. And there will be more aggressive moves going forward in order to figure out what this team looks like long term. Some of those decisions will not be made in the short term, but they will be made in a relatively short amount of time. And I think by the All-Star break, we'll really know what this team is going to look like for the next couple of years. We'll know if they've decided to move on from Zion Williamson. We know if they're going to trade a Herb Jones or a Trey Murphy. We'll know if Jose Alvarado is sticking around long term. We'll know all of those things, I believe, by the trade deadline this season. So when you look at this, ultimately, what the Pelicans did on draft night, it was unusual, but it was also a statement of purpose by Joe Dumars and Troy Weaver. This is what they believe in. This is the team that they're trying to build. They took their path and they're going to walk down it and they didn't place a safety net on this thing. They're not leaving breadcrumbs to find their way home. They are not looking back on these decisions. That's fine. That's fine. You've done it. And as folks have called this the Queen's Gambit, okay, it's been played. So ultimately what we'll see is, does this end up in a win, or are you get checkmated? If this thing collapses, again, the pressure will ultimately fall on Joe Dumars and Troy Weaver, more so than these players. But if it works out, if everything goes well, if you have found two franchise cornerstones, no one will remember the controversy at all, other than it as a historical footnote. So the Pelicans are obviously betting on the latter. We shall see. And I think there's a lot of confidence in fans right now, and there should be. Again, I'm not here to police people's joy. I'm not here to police your optimism. If you feel like this is a great team, if you feel optimistic about the future, then be that. Because that's not my job. You know what I'm saying? We have fan-centric shows on this station, on this network. We have fan-centric shows where the fans are talking about the guys who are not reporters, but who love this team, who know basketball, who do their own research. They have their opinions. Their position is to be more opinion-based. I'm a journalist, and I don't say this to boost myself. I just say what my responsibility and my role is. My job is to be analytical. My job is to take the information, break it down without heavy opinion on my end. I can draw conclusions. I can formulate what I think are, could happen. But ultimately, I don't have a stake in this. I want the Pelicans to do well because it's better to cover a winning team than a losing team. I think fans are happier. I'm happier. We all want to see winning. But it is not my job to root for the Pelicans. It is not my job to make the Pelicans look good. It is not my job to come out and support the Pelicans as an organization, as a team, as a record label, a staff, and a crew. It's just my job to take the news, take the information, present it to you in a digestible and understandable format. So that's what I'm going to continue to do. You know what I'm saying? So I see in the comments sometimes where people think that I'm being negative, or sometimes they think that I'm being unfair, or sometimes they think that I'm stating one thing when I mean another. You've got to take everything I say in its totality. If you're taking one episode of this show, and there are plenty to go back into to check my statements, but I try to be as consistent as possible unless the information changes. But you can go check those things and see what I've said in totality rather than just one statement. Go read the stuff I put on the Bird Rights. You see longer and more detailed accounts of what I think about this team. But ultimately, again, my job is to be as factual as possible, to be as logical as possible, and present you with the options and let you make the decisions. If you don't like them, I get it. I get it. But again, ultimately, my job is to inform, not to be a cheerleader. But let's go into this and let's look at Jonathan Kuminga, who could be another aggressive move by the New Orleans Pelicans. And I'm hearing different things on it from my man Scoop B. Robinson, who you hear that the Pelicans are really interested in Jonathan Kuminga. From other sources, I'm hearing that this is smoke and mirrors. But when you look at Kuminga in this offseason, 15 points, 5 rebounds, a guy who's 6'7", 6'8", depending on, where you look for these measurements. He has his good qualities: great athlete, great and open floor, does well on his advanced numbers. And he could be another versatile wing to add to the Pelicans stable, to complement Zion Williamson, if he can find that kind of consistency. If you are investing in another project, he's another potentially explosive project for the Pelicans. But there are problems, okay, in pursuing Jonathan Kuminga. Jonathan Kuminga can't shoot. He's about 30% from 3, 50% on 2s, not extremely efficient. He's not very tall, 6'7", 6'8", as we said, is not going to contribute as a rebounder for a team that needs rebounding. Basketball IQ. Steve Kerr has been very critical of Jonathan Kuminga and his development as a basketball player, as a team player. Individual skill sets versus team play are two very different things. Role. What would his role be with the New Orleans Pelicans? if Jonathan Kuminga is a starter, how does that work? Because you've got 3 players in your starting lineup ideally suited to play the small forward position in Zion Williamson, Trey Murphy, and Jonathan Kuminga. That's not a lot of ball handling and creation. It's not a lot of outside shooting other than Trey. You're putting that burden on Trey and Jordan Poole to do that work and Zion to create along with Jordan Poole. So if that's your starting lineup, there's some issues there. Again, I've said that this team at best needs to play with a lot of pace, but it also needs to be good at creating turnovers. That team is very switchable, certainly, but it's not very tall again. Trey Murphy being as tall as your center, and the rest of the guys being, between 6'5" and 6'8", it's not a very big team. So you get the athleticism, but you don't get great shot selection. You don't get a great efficiency. You don't get a great defender. And you enter in the problem of, look, Kuminga's a restricted free agent. And the Warriors have said that they're not going to just let him walk out the door for nothing. They can match any deal that they have. The cap gymnastics that would have to happen for the Pelicans to make this deal as well. Somebody's got to go. Obviously teams are trying to work with the Warriors on a sign and trade, but somebody's got to go. And most likely the salary to match would be Herb Jones and or one of either Jordan Hawkins or Jose Alvarado, if you're trying to make these salaries work to get this done. So the Pelicans don't have a lot of money available to them right now. They would have to trade somebody in order to to offer Kuminga the kind of contract that he's looking for. If you're offering a signing trade, again, you're offering players that you hope the Warriors want. And who are the Warriors going to want from the Pelicans roster? They're going to want either Trey Murphy or Herb Jones. Are you giving up either of those players for Jonathan Kuminga? I don't think that you are if you're the Pelicans. You can give up Herb Jones for Jonathan Kuminga? Why? Herb Jones is on a much more team-friendly contract. He contributes to your team, doesn't need shots, and is more efficient, absolutely, over the last 3 years than Jonathan Kuminga has been. So then also your base year compensation rules get really complicated for the Pelicans if they try to do a sign and trade. The Warriors can only take back half of his salary. So again, that's where that comes in. If you offer him a $25 to $30 million contract, you're going to have to give up Herb Jones, or you're going to have to give up or Jose Alvarado, or you have to give up more picks. Pelicans can't be giving up more picks. They need their picks. So it's a big logistical headache to try to add someone like Jonathan Kuminga. Again, the upside, if you get this, is you're hoping that Jonathan Kuminga develops as a jump shooter, that he can play within the structure of whatever offense the Pelicans are running, and that remains a giant question mark. And he can become, where does he fit in that pecking order? The 4th option behind Zion, Trey, and Poole? Is he the 3rd option? Where does he fit in that hierarchy? Coming off the bench, you have Saddiq Bey already, who plays a similar position and a similar role. Maybe not the athlete, certainly, that Kuminga is, but a similar role that would be needed with the Pelicans. So what does that mean for Saddiq Bey? If you give away Herb Jones on a team that finished next to last in defense, what does that do for a team that didn't add a lot of defense this offseason? It's a big risk. It's a big risk. And you still have, I guess, that Zion Williamson insurance that you could play Kuminga at the 4 if Zion gets hurt. But you're not getting the same, and that's the difficulty here, is you cannot replace and you cannot replicate what Zion Williamson does. And I don't think putting the ball in Jonathan Kuminga's hands as a volume player, which is what you do with Zion Williamson, would ultimately work. So it shifts how you're running your offense when you started into what you would need to do with Jonathan Kuminga to make him effective. So what you'll be watching for if this is really going to happen, and I still would say that the odds are against this. If anybody gets moved, if there are minor moves, then that might be indicative that they're trying to clear the space for Jonathan Kuminga. If you see that the Pelicans really can kind of present the Warriors with something that they want that isn't one of those players, again, I'd be surprised. And does Jonathan Kuminga really want to come to New Orleans when he has options that could be more favorable for him to win now? And that's the big problem for New Orleans. When people look at the Kevon Looney signing, they say, well, couldn't you get somebody better than him? And I would say, I don't know. Because, what I talked about before that signing, the day of it, eventually, he signed later that day. the thing was who is available to the Pelicans in their price range. Just because you want stuff, but there's stores we can't shop in, right? There's stores where they have a guard outside, and if you don't have the kind of money that they're looking for, you can't walk in. Or if you could view it like this, there's a cover charge when you're the New Orleans Pelicans and you want to get in the club. You got to pay the New Orleans surtax. And can the Pelicans pay that price time and time again for high-end talent? They really can't. So they have to pay it for lesser talent that can still contribute. You've got to get supplementary pieces more often than not in free agency for the Pelicans. You're not swinging to the fences. And the way the NBA is, the best players are rarely getting to the open market at this stage. The best players, the ones who really change franchise fortunes, are moving via trade because of the way the salary cap is set. So when you look at a Jonathan Kuminga, yeah, there's upside, but does he truly impact winning for the Pelicans, or are they better served playing the players they have now? Because you look at this roster and it's full. It's full. There's no room within it. So to give up one of these pieces, depending on the piece, and I'm not in love with every player on the Pelicans, but I'm saying is you have to create, once one domino leaves and another one enters, it changes the formula. And the thing for the Pelicans is that it has plenty of variables, but very few constants. Plenty of variables, very few constants. All right, let's look ahead where we're going to see some of these young players for the first time, and that's in the Summer League. A lot of the Summer League roster has already been revealed. We don't know yet everybody that's going to be on it, but we do have 8 names so far. And a lot of these you already know. First off, Titan Anderson, a guard/forward from Northern Iowa. He's 6'6". Hunter Dickinson, the center out of Kansas, 7'1". Jeremiah Fears, AJ Hoggard, another guard out of Vanderbilt, spent his first couple seasons with Michigan State, finished his career at Vanderbilt, 6'4". Chase Hunter, the guard out of Clemson, 6'4". Micah Peavy, 6'6". Derek Queen, 6'9". Lester Quinones, 6'4". So it's not a big team. When you get to Summer League, it's a guard-oriented session. Those 4 games are dominated by guards because you don't see a lot of post-entry passes. You're not going to see a lot of pick and roll to get the forward or the center shots. It's just not what you see. If Derek Queen is going to make a big impact, then he's going to have to get the ball himself more often than not. We'll see with Corey Brewer, who's slated to be the coach of the Summer League team. We'll see how he. I think that's kind of we're going to see if there's something that he's bringing from the Pelicans offense to these young players, or if he's just looking for them to do what they do best. And those are 2 different approaches, but I get the reason behind both of them. If you want to see them do best, what they do best, you want to see can those things translate against other NBA level players. And that's fine. If you're trying to run the Pelicans offense, if you're trying to implement those things now in the summer, that can be a little bit more of a difficult process. So the Pelicans will play 5 games in Las Vegas as they do every year. You are guaranteed 5 games. The first 4, it starts on July 10th. You get the Timberwolves at 3:30, July 12th against the Lakers, July 15th against the Trailblazers, July 16th against the Thunder. 4 Western Conference teams. You get to play against all of those. And we'll see where the Pelicans are by the time they get to their 5th game, which is based on their record in the first 4. The preseason schedule also out as well. The Pelicans play 4 preseason games. The first 2 of those games will be in Australia. The team this year does not play a game in the Smoothie King Center. Usually we get one, but because of the Australia tour, which was announced by the Pelicans in the spring, they will not play a game in New Orleans. The closest you'll get to them is on October 4th, is when they play at Legacy Arena at the Birmingham Jefferson Convention Center in Birmingham, Alabama, where the Squadron play. That'll be on October 14th at 7 p.m. The other games, the 2 in Australia, October 3rd and October 4th. And then finally they wrap against a team that they pretty much play every year, it seems like, the Orlando Magic, October 16th in Orlando. Okay, so going out of the Summer League, though, you will have an idea, I guess, if the Pelicans have made more moves, where they might finish in the Western Conference. And again, I think the Western Conference is really, really tough, obviously, from year to year. But when you look at what is necessary after these draft moves, the Pelicans have to make the playoffs. There is no room to not make the playoffs. Not when you've done what you've done this offseason. You didn't tear it down. You didn't say we're moving on. You are building a team. Publicly, you stated building a team around Zion Williamson. And there is nothing on the agenda for New Orleans Pelicans fans that's higher than seeing Zion Williamson play in the postseason for the first time. It has to happen. But the Pelicans are trapped currently in the middle of the Western Conference. Again, I believe that there are 6 teams that you would look at and say those are locks in the Western Conference. You know, you start with Oklahoma City, the defending champs. You go back to Minnesota, who's made 2 consecutive Western Conference finals. You think about Denver and the moves that they've made this offseason, and, you know, they still have arguably the best player in the NBA. You look at a team with Luka Doncic is going to make the playoffs more likely than not. So that would be 4. The Clippers have kind of retooled. They're bringing back their pieces. They've added Brook Lopez. You'd have to consider them a playoff team. So that gives you 5 right there. And then I think the Grizzlies, again, would have to be a team that you'd consider a playoff team at this stage. Everybody, and the Rockets. So there's another one. And the Houston Rockets, obviously, who've made their big moves with Kevin Durant and adding pieces around them. And they're still reportedly, you know, thinking about going after Giannis Antetokounmpo if he decides to opt out or to ask for a trade in Milwaukee. So that's 6 to 7. And if you want to quibble about a couple of those, okay. But let's say there are at least 5. Let's say 5. 5 teams that you think of that are going to take those top 5 spots. That leaves 5 more spots. From 6 to 13. From 6 to 13, how much of a difference is there between those teams? You know, we see every year in the West, it's a game and a half between, you know, these teams fighting for position at the bottom half of the Western Conference. So the Pelicans are not bad enough, and certainly they don't have the pick resources now. They're not bad enough to be tanking. They're not bad enough to punt on this season, but you're not an elite team either. You are fighting to be around 500. You're trying to win 21 more games than you did last season to finish above 500, and 21 more games. And in a single season turnaround, that can be really difficult to do no matter who you're getting back. So you're trying to drag a team that is firmly in the middle into the playoffs. Why is it so important to make the playoffs this year? Number 1, the draft. Again, Dumars traded those assets to get Queen and Fears. If the Pelicans miss and that pick becomes high, they're never going to hear the end of it. If you make the playoffs, at the very least, you can start to begin to justify the risk that you took. It doesn't finish it. As I said, it's going to take years for that, but it begins the process of justifying what they've done. Joe Dumars needs this. Troy Weaver needs this. Again, after the way that their tenures ended previously, they need to have these seasons to pay off, this season to pay off, so that the narrative changes around them. You don't want to be viewed as a pigeon for the rest of the league, that they've identified you as the marks and they're going to go get stuff from you. You also have to think about the future around with Zion and beyond. If this doesn't work, does Zion Williamson want to stay? Do you want to keep him? Does Trey Murphy want to stay? Does Jordan Poole want to stay? Do any of these veterans want to stay? Because Kevon Looney could be a guy who's here for 1 year if this thing falls apart. So you're moving all those vets on and you are building around this younger team. That future planning becomes a lot easier if you make the playoffs, because now you're adding to pieces. If you think you can make a better run, if Zion plays 60 plus games, if you make it to this, let's say you win a first round series, if something like that happens, you are now building around this team rather than dismantling, which is what you're likely to have to do if you do not make the playoffs this season. So you have a lot of pressure on these rookies to deliver. You've got Zion, the pressure on him to stay healthy and to compete. And then you have a very tiny margin for error. Very tiny. But if you get Derek Fears to play to his potential as a rookie, again, it's not going to be dynamic. I think he's going to average somewhere around 9 points, maybe 10. If you get that, if you get Queen playing up to his potential, he's giving you 15 points or so. And Zion is playing like he plays at his best. New Orleans is definitely a playoff team then. If all that happens, New Orleans is a playoff team, and you won't, there's no question about that in my mind. But again, you have so many variables and very few constants in this equation. So it can go very right or it could go very wrong. When you look at these things, what are you going to be looking for early on? Can the Pelicans steal any wins early in the season? When the schedule comes out, we're going to be looking at that again, because the Pelicans, we've talked about this over the years. If you've seen me, I've written about this. When the Pelicans get off to a start of finishing above 500 in their first 10 games, if they're above 500 after their first 10, they usually make the playoffs. They've not made it except for the 36 and 46 year where they, made it through the play-in. That's the only year in franchise history where they finished below 500 in the first 10 games and made the playoffs. So you're going to be looking at that early. History has tended to say if Pelicans come out of the gate strong, and that includes under Willie Green, if the Pelicans come out of the gate strong, they usually do well. What are they doing against the teams that are around their level? Do they win their series against Utah? Do they win their series against Sacramento? Do they win their series against Memphis? Do they win against San Antonio? Do they win against the teams that they are clustered, Portland, that they are clustered with? Can they get a winning record and win those series ultimately against those teams? At very least, break 500 in the series where you have 4 games with a team. But you want to win as many of those as possible, obviously. Teams that are around you, you have to beat the folks you're supposed to beat. And the people at your level are the teams you're supposed to beat. How does Zion mesh with the rest of his teammates this year? Can they get the opportunity to get used to seeing him on the court and playing with him? Think about the Allen Iverson thing. The practice sessions that they derided Allen Iverson for were not for his benefit. They were for his teammates' benefit. Larry Brown's problem with Allen was not that he felt like Allen needed to practice every day, but he felt like his teammates needed to be out there with him because he's such a unique player. And I would say the same for Zion Williamson. He's such a unique player. You cannot replicate him in practice if he's not there, whether as an opponent or as a teammate. So Zion being there is obviously a critical part of this. I don't have to overstate that. And what does the front office do to ultimately, when they find out what kind of team they have, what moves are they able to make, or what moves do they not make in order to keep this team competitive or make a surge for the playoffs when you get to February, March, April? Look at those metrics. Look at the things. Is the defense getting better? This team needs to finish like only 2 teams out of 15 in the bottom 15 in defense last year had winning records. Some of those made the play-in, but only 2 teams in the bottom 15 of the defensive standings had winning records. So the Pelicans have to at least get to the middle of the pack defensively this season. So pay attention to that early. Don't worry as much about the offense. It's going to come around, I would imagine, over time. But pay attention to that defense right out of the gate. So, and the other question that ultimately looms over the franchise again is Willie Green. It's hard not to overstate how much control Willie Green has over the future of this franchise. When you look at the James Borrego situation where the Knicks are interested in having Borrego join their staff, but the Pelicans want to keep him, why are you keeping him if you're keeping Willie Green? Yeah, you want to have James Borrego and his offensive mind, but through 2 seasons, we haven't seen Willie Green utilize that. And there's a reputation now, whether it's accurate or not, that Willie Green does not take consulting very easily. He does not take advice very easily. He wants to do what he wants to do. And if that's the case for a guy like James Borrego, who doesn't get to collaborate on the thing that he was brought in to do, fix the offense, that has to be really frustrating. And then you look at a team like the Knicks that needs offense. He thinks he could do a really good job there. I'm sure he was one of the finalists for the head coaching job. Was the finalist in Phoenix as well for that coaching job. Didn't get it, but I mean, there's obviously some people who think highly of him, or his agent is really good in getting him interviews. But Willie Green has such an impact on this, because if the goal is to make the playoffs and you put this on Willie Green to get this team into the postseason, is he willing to go 10 deep in his bench early in the season to develop these guys so that he knows what he has late in the season? Is he willing to find new ways to get creative in finding opportunities for his players to score? Does he know what to do with Jordan Poole? Does he know what to do with Trey Murphy? Does he know what to do with these young players who need to develop? Willie Green is the biggest variable in all of this. As much as we can put criticism on Joe Dumars or Troy Weaver for the decisions they made on draft night, the question I think that'll be judged more than anything else in a year's time is the decision to keep Willie Green. and it's all on Willie to figure it out. Whether or not he can is another question. All right, that's going to do it as we head into the weekend. Enjoy your holiday as best you can. Stay out of the heat. But before you do, make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you leave a comment below. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you share with somebody who's a basketball fan or somebody who just likes cool t-shirts, I guess. But until the next time, you can follow me on social media at DM Grubb on Twitter, on Instagram. You can find me on Blue Sky. You can find me on TikTok. This has been the Post Up with David Grubb on Boo Crew Media. See you on Monday.